In June 2026, a Chinese robotics company most people had never heard of did something that surprised nearly every expert in the field. It unveiled a full-size lifelike humanoid robot aimed at ordinary homes, and the public response exploded. Within hours, the internet began calling it a dating robot. The company insisted that was not the purpose. None of that slowed the story. More than 13,000 orders arrived in a short window. The highest configurations cost as much as a small apartment in some cities. The firm behind the product had spent more than a decade building machines for factory floors, not living rooms. Almost no one predicted this moment. China had just offered a consumer humanoid that the rest of the industry still treated as a project for the next decade. If you enjoy videos that dig into unexpected technology shifts, hit the like button. These take real work to research. Subscribe so you do not miss the next one. What follows is the story of a robot, but it is really a story about loneliness, about a company that placed a large bet on human emotion, and about what happens when technology moves faster than the rules that usually govern it. To understand how it happened, start with a company that spent years making the least glamorous robots possible before the middle of 2026. If you had asked people who follow robotics which firm was most likely to sell a companion humanoid household, UBTech would not have appeared on many lists. For more than 10 years, the Shenzhen company operated in the background of the industry. Its machines performed the kind of work that only becomes news when something goes wrong. Quality inspection on automotive lines, moving heavy components from station to station, sorting parts in factories that run around the clock. Its best-known industrial model, the Walker series, was a full-size humanoid built for exactly that environment. It was strong, precise, and completely without charm. Customers bought it because it could lift, inspect, and repeat the same task for thousands of hours without complaint. Automakers cared whether it could spot a bad weld on a moving chassis, not whether it could hold a conversation. In the whole of 2025, the company sold roughly 1,000 of those full-size industrial units. That was the scale of its presence outside factory gates. Most people on Earth had never seen one, never touched one, and never thought about one. So when the same company announced it was building a humanoid for the home, the industry largely shrugged. The shared assumption for years had been that the first successful home humanoid would earn its place by doing useful work, washing dishes, folding laundry, navigating cluttered rooms without knocking things over. Homes are far more chaotic than factory floors. Chairs move, pets run. Children leave toys everywhere. Building a robot that could handle all of that reliably was considered the central barrier, and most forecasts placed a practical solution 5 to 10 years away. UBTech looked at that barrier and chose not to climb it. Instead, the company asked a different question. What if people did not primarily want a robot to do chores? What if they wanted a robot simply to be present? That question flipped the usual logic of the field. From the beginning of industrial automation, robots had been about replacing human labor. UBTech was proposing to address human absence. Brand executives described companionship as a form of demand with almost no upper limit on emotional value and relevance across every stage of life. Stripped of corporate language, the idea was straightforward. People will always need someone to talk to, and that need does not disappear. The founder defended the high price by arguing that a machine combining some practical help, emotional presence, and an appealing appearance could reasonably cost between $100,000 and $200,000 in its top versions. Notice that chores appeared in the sentence, but the real weight fell on presence and appearance. The bet was emotional, not practical. A company known for factory work saw the industry racing toward a technical milestone and simply chose a different race. Whether the choice was brilliant or reckless was about to be tested in public. The launch took place in Shenzhen at the end of June 2026. The company brought out a full-size humanoid called the Yuan and had it move across the stage with a human performer. The imagery was deliberate. They were not showing the robot hauling crates or tightening bolts. They were showing it moving in a social setting. The contrast with the industrial Walker models could not have been clearer. The Yuan was built for one primary purpose: to keep a person company. It could talk, remember details about the owner's life, respond to facial expressions and tone of voice, and remain nearby during ordinary evenings. It did not sort packages or weld metal. Its function was presence. The price range was high. Entry versions started around 120,000 yuan, roughly $17,000. The top configurations reached nearly 1 million yuan, close to $140,000. In many cities, that is the price of a home or a substantial portion of one. Every reasonable forecast said a product like this would struggle. Instead, the opposite occurred. More than 13,000 confirmed orders arrived within a short period. The company's share price rose. Something experts had treated as distant future simply appeared as a product people could reserve and eventually receive. The viral moment was not driven by a leaked video or a staged trick. It was driven by the fact that the machine was suddenly real and available for purchase. No companion humanoid had crossed that threshold before. What the Yuan actually offers is conversation and advanced, expensive, physically limited conversation with something that looks roughly like a person and responds to speech and expression. It cannot clean. It cannot stay awake all night. It cannot be a romantic partner. But it can sit nearby and talk. On the first day of public availability, that was enough for more than 13,000 people to place deposits. Reactions arrived from every direction and they were intense. Inside China, on platforms such as Weibo and Shouhongshu, the public split into two broad camps. One camp was sincere. Young professionals under heavy career pressure and social expectation saw the yuan as a kind of relief. Human relationships carry weight. They require compromise, risk rejection, and sometimes end in disappointment. The robot removed those risks. It would not argue, leave, or criticize. A widely shared comment captured the feeling. A companion that never betrays you or walks away is worth the money. That sentiment resonated with people who understood exactly what was being offered. Not a machine that does work, but a guarantee of steady presence in a world where human bonds can feel fragile. The other camp was openly skeptical. Critics called the price absurd for a device that cannot tidy a room. The limited battery life became a punchline. Some dismissed the whole product as a luxury object for wealthy people trying to buy their way out of loneliness. A deeper concern also surfaced repeatedly: surveillance. A machine designed to listen, watch facial expressions, track preferences, and adapt to mood is by nature a powerful data collection tool. Critics compared bringing one home to installing a camera that never turns off. Even with promises of local storage and encryption, the idea of a device constantly observing unsettled many. That fear is not irrational. A robot engineered to pay continuous attention raises privacy questions that no privacy policy can fully settle. Western media coverage tended toward dystopian readings. Commentators reached for older science fiction references and focused on the awkward pauses in demonstration conversations, arguing that the emotional intelligence was still too rough to make talking to a silicone face feel natural. Some researchers pushed back against pure alarm. One expert who studies human-android interaction noted that these machines are arriving whether people like them or not, and the only way to understand their effects is to observe real interaction. Recording teaches little. The useful questions are what the robots actually do to people once they enter homes. Those questions sit on top of larger social numbers. China today has more than 90 million adults who live alone. Beyond that group are more than 100 million older people whose adult children have moved to other cities for work, the classic empty nest generation. For centuries, Chinese family life rested on the expectation that children would care for aging parents and that multiple generations would remain close. That structure is under pressure from urban careers and long-distance migration. Young people move for jobs. The parents, they leave behind age in apartments that once held full families. By recent counts, nearly 1/5 of the population is already 60 or older, and this share continues to rise. A large population is growing older with limited daily company. Among younger people, a different pattern has appeared. Surveys of Chinese internet users under 40 have found that the large majority have already interacted socially with some form of artificial intelligence, a substantial share report feeling emotionally dependent on it. When facing a difficult personal problem, more than half said they would rather confide in an AI than in another human being. Only a small minority still preferred a person. The reasons are easy to understand. Sharing something vulnerable with a human carries the risk of judgment, gossip, or a shift in the relationship. Sharing with a machine carries none of those risks. The machine has no opinions, no social circle, and no capacity to pull away. For a generation that grew up under the constant possibility of online judgment, a system that simply listens can feel safer than a friend. The yuan was designed to occupy exactly that space. Analysts have begun calling the broader market the loneliness business of selling connection to people who struggle to find it through traditional channels. That economy already includes chatbots, virtual companions, and AI conversation tools. The yuan was different because it was not software on a screen. It was a physical body in the room, a face that could be seen, a voice that came from something standing nearby. The robotics industry had been measuring whether a robot could handle chores. It should also have been measuring whether people were lonely enough to want the robot, even if it never touched a dish. The early order numbers suggested the answer was yes. The speed of the public response also triggered a regulatory reaction. Within weeks of the launch, Chinese authorities introduced the country's first rules specifically aimed at anthropomorphic artificial intelligence. The new requirements include anti-addiction measures such as prompts to take breaks, interventions when users show signs of deep dependence, and an outright ban on offering virtual intimate relationships to minors. Compliance forced major technology platforms to alter or remove personalized companion features for large numbers of users. One consumer product launch produced a national regulatory shift in a matter of weeks. The sharpest concern centers on children. Psychologists have warned that extended interaction with machines that always agree and never push back could affect the development of social skills. Real people argue, disagree, and sometimes leave. Those frictions are part of how people learn to handle other people. Even inside the industry, some voices argue that technology should ultimately free people rather than trap them. The stated goal of many robotics projects is to relieve humans of repetitive labor so they can focus on creativity and relationships. That vision sits in tension with a product that costs as much as a house and offers a few hours of conversation before it needs to recharge. China's response is only one approach. Different countries are developing different rules for machines built to be treated as companions. There is no shared global playbook. Every government is improvising while the technology moves faster than the law. Step back and the larger picture becomes clearer. For years, the brightest minds in robotics shared one central belief. The machine that would finally reach ordinary consumers would be the one that did useful physical work. Roadmaps and investment theses were built on that foundation. The machine that broke through does almost none of that work. It simply keeps a person company. The thousands of orders, the stock movement, and the rapid regulatory response did not happen because of a sudden leap in mechanical capability. They happened because a company correctly read how lonely many people had become and how much some of them would pay to feel slightly less alone. The engineers spent years refining joints, motors, silicon, skin, and balance systems. That work was real and difficult. But the insight that mattered most was not mechanical. It was emotional. They noticed something the rest of the industry had overlooked. The deepest unmet need in modern life is not always for labor. It is for connection. People were not primarily excited about the robot's technical specifications. They were excited about what it represented, the possibility of something that would always be present, would not argue, would not leave, and would not judge. For more than 13,000 early buyers, that possibility was worth a very high price. Not the possibility of clean dishes. The possibility of company. Beneath the sales numbers sits a question the whole world is now forced to confront. Is this development good or bad? The answer depends on who is asked. Some see a genuine lifeline. An elderly person living alone while children work in another city may find a machine that talks and remembers preferences far better than silence. Others see a dangerous shortcut. A young person who chooses a machine over human friends because the machine is easier, may be avoiding the very friction that builds maturity. Human relationships demand patience, compromise, and the courage to be vulnerable. If a machine removes all of that friction, it may also remove the growth that comes with it. The yuan does not settle the debate. It makes the debate urgent. It turns a philosophical question into a practical one because a product is already on the market and thousands of people have already ordered it. The deepest question the robot leaves behind is not whether a machine can love anyone back. It cannot. A system that simulates warmth is not feeling warmth. A system that remembers habits is not caring. The comfort it creates is real for the person who feels it, but it is generated by code, not by a heart. The more important question is why so many people, offered even the appearance of steady presence, opened their wallets without hesitation, and what that reveals about the world that made them want the product so badly. That question has no simple answer. It is, however, the one that matters. And it is the one almost no one in the industry was seriously asking until more than 1,000 orders in a short period made it impossible to ignore. If this story held your attention and you want more like it, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. Related videos are on the screen. If you want to keep watching, here's a question for you. If you could afford a yuan, would you actually buy one? Or would you rather remain alone than talk to a machine? Drop your honest answer in the comments.